So, 3 text editors that are free, that are actually text editors, that are not word processors. These are plain text editors, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means. For Windows, Notepad++ is a fairly good programmer's text editor. For Macintosh, Text Wrangler is a fairly good programmer's text editor. I'm using Text Wrangler here. And for Linux, gedit is a fairly standard programmer's text editor, pretty full-featured. So if you don't already have one of those, go ahead and download it and install it on your system, get it up and running. So I mentioned that Text Wrangler, Notepad++, and gedit are plain text editors. Computers are deceptive. Over here I have picking this at random, I didn't know it was going to be on my desktop. I have an icon, and in that icon we can see characters that look like M-E-N-D-E-L-E-Y, or Mendeley. What is that? What are those? At best, they're symbols. Are they text? They're pixels in an image, right? Even though they look like text to us. We know they're text. The computer thinks of them as an image. Similarly with this stuff, this is text. I promise you, this is text. This the computer sees as actual characters on a page. When I pull up something like Pages, these things that look like text are not, in fact, text. This is binary information. It's being stored with all sorts of formatting data about what font it's in and what point size and what color it is and whether it's bold or italicized or not. If I look at this file, if I save this out to the computer, specifically, let me save it out as a Microsoft Word document. Save this out on my desktop. Call it test. If I try to open up that file from within a plain text editor, this is what I see. All of that binary encoded information, it tries its best to represent it as characters that I might recognize, but not a great job of that. And if I scroll around here enough, you start to see some things that look like English, document summary information down at the bottom there, but not what we would think of as just simple, plain text that you can type on the keyboard. HTML and most computer languages are represented as just plain text files. We need a text editor that will allow us to work with text, just text, only text, doesn't add any extra information to it, doesn't add any formatting codes to it, doesn't store what the last printer was that we used with this document, right? Just text. I've set a few, I mentioned that these were all programmers' text editors. I've set a few options in the preferences for it to do things like show line numbers over on the left-hand side in the gutter, and to show invisible characters, like here we're seeing carriage returns as little L brackets, and we're seeing tab stops as vertical thin gray lines. If I tab over, we'll see that as a delta. If I hit space a few times, we see that as diamonds. Those gray characters aren't part of the document. It's just showing me all of those special meta characters, because sometimes things like tabs and spaces and carriage returns are going to matter to me, and so I'd like to have an idea of where those exist in the document. So ignore those generally, but that's what's going on. Each text editor represents those things differently. It's usually available through some option like show invisibles. And I found mine in the Text Wrangler preferences, show invisibles, show spaces. Programmers' text editors also generally will provide what's called syntax coloring. which attempts to highlight, it's not always perfect, and again, every text editor does it slightly differently, but it attempts to highlight keywords and phrases and structures in the document that we type based on what it thinks the document is, whether it's HTML or some other programming language like C++ or Objective-C or Java or JavaScript. Since I'm going to be working in HTML, I'm going to set that for the moment. And as I start to type things in HTML, we'll see that it syntax colors it for me to try to highlight where the different parts of the document are. HTML is about the structure of the document. Right? If you look at any sort of typical printed document, say on letterhead, there are common elements to it. You've got a banner across the top that's the company's logo. You've got maybe some meta information on there like phone numbers and addresses, and you've got the main body of the document. What I've done just in preparation here is create on my computer a folder called HTML Intro. It's currently empty, and I'm going to save my files into there. So I want to create the simplest possible HTML document that I can. Turns out it's pretty simple. There you go. That's an HTML document. We call those two things tags. On line 1, I have an opening tag, what I might call an opening HTML tag. And on line 2, I have a closing HTML tag, the slash character, not to be confused with the backslash, because again, we will care about the difference between those at different times. The slash character indicates that it's the end of the HTML portion of the document. It's the closing of the document. And I can go ahead and I can do file save. By convention, the base document in a web project is always called index.html. All lowercase. Case is going to matter. Spaces are going to matter in file names. Keep your file names simple. So index.html, and I'm going to find my HTML intro folder and go ahead and save it in there. And now, again, I'm going to find my HTML intro folder. Notice that that's got a little Safari icon next to it. That's what the Mac does for it. If I just double click it, my web browser is going to load it up. There it is. There's my HTML document. Woohoo! All right, it's blank, I grant you. Not very exciting so far. But it's a start. It's a valid HTML document. Switching back to my text editor, come back to me. I'd like to add some information to this HTML document. That generally means adding more tags. And again, by convention, what we usually do is indent each level of tags that we're working in so that it's easy to read the document. Just as often as not, humans need to read your HTML as computers do. So keeping a strong sense of organization within the document helps other programmers and helps you when you come back to it in 6 months and don't remember what you did or why. HTML documents have two main sections. The head, I'll close the head section on line 3, and a body section. And I'll close the body on line 5. Again, those delta characters are just tabs, so that I've indented there. And again, this goes back to the idea of a document generally, that you've got the head of the document, you've got the body of the document, and then you can put things into those two places, following certain sets of rules. So far, what I would say is that I have an HTML tag. Inside of that, I have a head tag, a closing head tag, a body tag, and a closing body tag. Right? If I save this and reload this in my web browser, I'm not going to see any change. Nothing special so far. I haven't added any content into those areas yet. I've just said this document has those areas. So I'll switch back over. I would like my document to have a title. If you had to guess at this point, where do you think the title of a document goes? Is it in the HTML itself? Is it in the body section? Is it in the head section?
Do you want a page title? Or
Yes, a page title. You know, the one that would appear on the tab of a window or up on the top of a window. In the head section, to be specific, not the header. Because it's metadata about the document. It's not actually part of the document. It's the name of it. It's like a little label that we're putting on a file folder. And like everything else in HTML, there is a tag that goes along with that. Title. And a closing title tag. There are different conventions for when we put the opening and closing tags on different lines and when we put them on the same line. I'm just going to sort of go by instinct for the moment for what I know. For something like a title, almost always I know the title is just going to be a one-line thing, so I just leave the whole thing as a single line. The head section of my document might consist of lots of different lines of information, and the body almost always consists of lots of lines of information, so I tend to split those out on multiple lines. But I'd like to call this something, my sample page. Right? And again, those diamonds are just spaces in my document. So notice what I've done. I've added content in between the opening title tag and the closing title tag. Taken all together now, I've got an opening tag, an opening title tag, I've got content, and I've got a closing title tag, and I would refer to that whole set of three things as an element. That's an element of my page. If I go ahead and save that, switch over to my browser, and hit reload, notice that my tab has now changed. It has my title on it. Okay. Nothing in the body of the document yet, but I'm starting to get some information in my HTML document. So let me go ahead and add some content to the body of my document. I want to add a header, a heading. As with everything, I'm going to need an opening and a closing tag. This is distinct from the metadata, the head. I actually want to have a heading, like a large typeface piece of text that appears on my page. H1. And the idea is that you have heading level 1, heading level 2, right, subheadings, heading level 3, sub-subheadings, and so on. So H1 is the top level heading, the most prominent heading that's going to be on the page. And then you put content in between the opening and the closing H1 tags. My sample. Just so I can distinguish the title from the heading that's going to appear. And again, if I hit save, switch over to my web browser and hit reload, there's my very large, prominent, bold text. It's up to the browser at this point to decide how an H1 element is supposed to be formatted on the screen. I didn't tell it to put that text flush left. I didn't tell it to make it, whatever that is, 18 point. I didn't tell it to make it bold. I didn't tell it to make it Times Roman. The web browser has defaults for all of those things, and it just decided. And part of what we're going to look at is how to change those defaults. So in addition to my heading, I want to add a paragraph to the page. Fortunately, the tag for that is a P tag, and there's an opening P tag, a closing P tag. And then you put the content of your paragraph in the middle. And I'm going to put a lot of it there. Let's see here. If I can figure out how to do this easily.
Is it the hard wrap?
I don't want to hard wrap it. Hard wrapping is usually, that's what I want.
Awesome.
Hard wrapping actually puts in carriage returns at the end of every line. A soft wrap just wraps it around so I can see it within my window. So here's my content. You can see everything in that paragraph is between the opening paragraph tag and the closing paragraph tag. Okay. And if I hit save, switch over to my browser and hit reload, there's my page. I'm going to change my preferences here just a little bit because it's getting difficult to see everything that's there. That's a little, well, that's almost a little better. There we go. So you can see the syntax highlighting at work here. All of the tags are in blue. All of the content is in black. I can easily see if I've made a mistake by not typing both of the less than and greater than symbols around one of my tags. If I missed the greater than symbol on line 7 there, notice how my type suddenly changes color. Syntax highlighting really makes that stand out for you, so you can see probably around where you made a typo. Right? So I can do paragraphs. I'm going to simplify my paragraph a little bit. I can do multiple paragraphs. There they are. And as is typical of a paragraph, if I save and reload that into my web browser, paragraphs have a blank line between them. They have a gap between them so that they appear as if they were, in fact, paragraphs on the page. I want to add emphasis to this word great on line 7. HTML, everything's about the tags. So I'm going to indicate that I want this to have emphasis with an EM tag and an EM close tag wrapped around it. This is the text of my great sample page. If I save that and reload that in my browser, you can see it's italicized, that first great. Screen readers, for people who have visual impairment and are having the text of the page read to them, will interpret things like EM tags to actually add emphasis as they're speaking that text. So this information that we're adding, this markup that we're adding to the document, can be used in lots of different ways. My web browser decides it needs to be italics, but if I were having the page read to me, it might be read with that extra oomph in the word great. I can also do things like indicate that a section should be presented strongly with the strong tag, EM and strong, on line 8. And if I save that and switch over and reload, there's what strong does. It makes it nice and bold there. But again, it's up to my browser to decide what emphasis means and what strong means. There are other tags that I can use. Paragraphs are not the only thing that I can have as part of my page. I could also have an image. We abbreviate that IMG. And with the image tag, we've got a weird thing. Image tags indicate that we're supposed to go out and load an image into our current web page. There's no sense in which within the document itself there's an image opening tag and an image closing tag and then content in between them. Right? The actual image data resides in a JPEG file or a GIF file or a PNG file that's sitting on our hard drive or out on the web. So image tags, we say, close themselves. Instead of having a separate closing image tag, we just add space / to the end of the image tag. And there's going to be some more information that I'll add in there in just a second. But that's the beginning of an image tag which closes itself, rather than having a separate standalone close image tag. With an image, we also have to identify certain attributes of the image, like where is it coming from? What's the file name? Right? That's called the source of the image, SRC. And I give it the source of the image by saying SRC equals, quote unquote, and then the name of the image file in between the quotes. My problem at the moment is I don't have an image handy. So I'm going to go out and find one. I'm going to go onto the web. I'll go to Google. And I just really like the Google logo. See if I can grab that. If I right-click on the Google image, there's a copy image address in my web browser. On yours, it might be copy image URL or copy image location or something of that sort. And if I look at what's on my clipboard now, it's that thing, right? It's that URL, that address to an image, ssl_logo.png. Now, this is a secure image, but let's see if this works. If I go back to my text document and paste that URL in as the source of my image and hit save, switch over to my browser and reload, there it is. An image is part of my web page. So when I'm specifying the source of an image, it can be a full URL telling it what web server it's on, what directory it's in, and what the file name is. Or I can specify an image that's sitting on my own local computer. Like, I don't always want to be reaching out to Google's servers to grab that image, or to grab any image. So let me, while I'm here, find another image. Here we go. I have a screenshot that I've taken here that's a PNG. That's an image file. All right, I'll change the name of it. Mendeley.png. I'm going to put that image in the same folder with my HTML file so that it's easy for my web page to find. If a file is in the same folder as my HTML page, I just have to give HTML the name of the file. I don't have to tell it where to go to find it. I just give it its name. Making sure to match uppercase and lowercase, whatever that was. We call that a relative URL. Line 15 has a relative URL. I'm telling my page where to find the image relative to the index.html file. Line 14 has an absolute URL. I'm telling it exactly what server to go to, what directory to go into, what path to follow, and what the file name is. So again, if I hit save, switch over to my web browser and hit reload, there's my Mendeley image. I can add other attributes to my image, like width equals. And then I can specify the width of the image, how wide it should be displayed, in terms of pixels, dots on the screen. So let's say I want this thing to just be 100 px, 100 pixels wide. If I save that, switch over and reload, there's the 100 pixel Mendeley image, just 100 pixels wide. There are a lot of attributes that can be added to just about any tag. But you can see that the attributes sometimes provide absolutely critical information like the name of the file that's supposed to be included, and sometimes optional but useful information like how wide should something be displayed or how tall it should be on the page. If you noticed, even though my two image tags in my HTML source code are on separate lines, in my rendered web page rather, the two images are being displayed right next to one another. That's because HTML doesn't care about line breaks. It ignores them. Treats them as if it was all one line. If I want to have a break between those two images, if I want them to be separate, one under the other, I need to do something else like add a break to the page, which I've just added at line 15 there. Break, or BR, is another tag that closes itself. There aren't very many of those in HTML, so fortunately, we only have to remember a handful. But again, with a line break, a carriage return, there's no sense in which there's an opening line break and a closing line break and what's in between the line break. No. A line break is just a line break. So if I save that and reload it and wait for just a second, There we go. The Google image is displayed. There's a break after the Google image, and then the Mendeley image is displayed. Google image at line 14, a break at line 15, Mendeley image at line 16. And you notice how much faster the Mendeley image loaded than the Google image. Right? The Google image had to reach out over the Bennington campus network, out to our backbone through Boston probably, across the country to San Diego, to Google's service centers, to their servers, grab the image and have it come back across the country, back through Bennington's campus network to my computer so it could be displayed on my screen. Mendeley.png was on my hard drive. There are other ways that I can specify the width. I've told it I want it to be 100 pixels right now. I could have said that I want it to be 50%. So pretty quickly I can start to put together an actual page here. I like the Mendeley logo. I like it at about 150 pixels, so I'm going to go back to that. The rest of this text, not so interesting to me. Let me take that image tag, put that in my header, get rid of everything else. So I've said I want a heading on my page, heading 1, with an image that's the Mendeley image, 150 pixels wide, and text that reads Mendeley Citations Manager. And again, this wrapping around to the next line, we don't care, it doesn't matter. If I save that and reload it, there's the beginnings of my web page. And I might say, well, 150 pixels, that's pretty big. Let's cut that in half. 75 pixels, reload that. It's starting to look a little bit more manageable. You can download Mendeley from http://mendeley.com. And I'll make that a paragraph on my page. I haven't stressed this, but note that all of my paragraphs and the names of my attributes are lowercase. So src is lowercase, width is lowercase, img is lowercase, h1p, body, head, title, HTML. Tag names and attribute names in HTML are lowercase. The value that's in between the quotation marks and the content that's in between the tags, you just match whatever case you want it to have or need. Right? So HTML, as you might imagine, has a way of tagging something as being a link. The tag in HTML is the A tag. Obvious, right? There's an opening A tag and a closing A tag. A stands for link, because in English the word link begins with A. Okay. Tim Berners-Lee originally referred to links as anchors, and that notation sticks around. So A tags are the anchor. They're the link to something else. But we have to specify what it links to. Just saying it's a link doesn't take us anywhere. We have to say where it links to. It would make sense if it were the src attribute that did that, but it's not. It's href, which stands for hyperreference. It's the reference to which we want this thing to point. And then you just give the URL that you want it to go to, http://mendeley.com. So now I've got that URL appearing in two places, right? The first says, this is the actual hyperreference. This is where I want this link to go to. The second time I typed this out here, that's just the content that's going to appear on screen. That's what the user's going to see, typically as a blue underlined block of text on screen that you can click on. I don't have to have this content be the URL. It could be something else. I could have said you can download Mendeley from their download page. And I'll show you that in just a second. Let me save this, switch over and reload. And sure enough, it's now a link. When I mouse over it, my pointer turns into a hand. If I look in the lower left there, I can see the status bar tells me that if I click here, this is going to go to mendeley.com. Okay. I've just linked together two documents on the web. So let me change the content. You can download Mendeley from their downloads page. And if I switch back and reload, now that text is that same link going to the same location out on the web. If I had another HTML document in addition to index.html, say it was called about.html. You see a lot of websites that have an about or an about us link. How would I link to about.html?
So it's just saved as a separate HTML page in the same folder?
What's the URL to this other page going to be?
It's going to be whatever the splash page is, or whatever the page is that's /about.html. That's what you name it.
I need to work backward here a little bit, right? I don't actually have an about page yet. I haven't made the thing.
Yeah.
So I need to make an about page. It's an HTML document with a head and a body. And in the head, I want it to have a title. And I want the title to be about me. And in the body, I want to have a paragraph that says, I am Will Doan. Notice so far that I'm not getting syntax highlighting here. It's because my text editor doesn't yet know what kind of file this is. When I try to save this, and I say it's going to be called about.html, my text editor figures out it's an HTML file, and now it will be happy to show me my syntax highlighting. Yeah? So all the same basic elements that we've already looked at, an HTML document, a head section with a title section, a body with a paragraph. And again, programmers' text editors will typically have a project drawer like I have on the right here that show you your files and warn you which ones have and haven't been saved. Text Wrangler shows you that with a little diamond in the corner. So now I can switch back to the index page, and now I know what the name of that file is supposed to be, about.html. Put the little project drawer away for a moment. You can read more about me on my About page. That's what the user will see on screen, but what it will link to is the file about.html that's saved in the same directory as my index.html file. So if I've saved that and I hit reload, you can read more about me on my About page. And if I mouse over it, notice on the status bar down at the bottom, I get this pretty ugly URL because I'm loading it off my hard drive. file://users/wget/document/dev/html-intro/about.html. That's because that's where that file happens to be stored on my hard drive. Because that's a relative link, if I took this folder with my index.html file, my Mendeley PNG file, and my about.html file, and if I uploaded that to a web server somewhere so that it would be available publicly, that about link would still, or that link would still point to my about.html file, but now it would point to the one that's up on the web server because it's relative to wherever the index file is. They move together. They stay as a package. And if I click this link, sure enough, there's my About page. I don't have any links back yet, but I could add one of those. I'll just use my browser's back button for now. And if I click the Mendeley Downloads page button, I can see my browser's trying to load the Mendeley.com site. There it is.